Okay, hi everyone. Just before we get started, I wanted to make a quick, point out to our casting call. So, Studio Reverie is looking for a few more voice actors. Unfortunately, we did lose Hollow and Lightning as Julius and Ricardo, so we are fully recasting for Julius Jaculius. We will be doing callbacks for, especially Julius, because he is a huge key player in Arc 6. And we need to see how you interact with Wolf to get that Julius Subaru interaction. For Ricardo, we may have some callbacks, but we may just hire you on the spot as well. We're looking for some extras, but also with the extras, we're looking into our understudies as well. So if there's any ReZero character that you love and want to play, even if it's my characters, even if it's Subaru, please feel free to submit an audition doing your version of any of the characters you love or think that your voice can have or can do. And we might be able to cast you into our understudy pool in case one of us needs a vacation or our schedules don't line up. So please feel free to give that a shot and enjoy the chapters. Bye!
Arc 5, Chapter 54, The Combat Power of Non-Combatants.
Gluttony.
Before the nightmare that stood in front, Otto could not help but have cold sweat run down his back. The opponent, who had identified himself as a Sin Archbishop. The name of Gluttony had already been heard by Otto. However, that name was...
From what I heard, the name of the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony was supposed to be Roy Alfred.
You already met us before meeting us. If so, then Oni-san, to be left uneaten and coming out normally is quite impressive indeed. Especially when anything is a treat for Roy of bizarre eating.
The boy, who claimed to be Leibatan Kaitos, smiled and laughed at Otto's question. Hearing that laughter, Otto knew that his terrible idea had been affirmed. There were two Sin Archbishops of Gluttony.
No, to be accurate, at least two of them.
Lei and Roy. Rather, the duo of Batan Kaitos and Alphard? At worst, it may be necessary to assume they were a nightmare, like the Great Rabbit of the Myriads. Julius and Ricardo were supposed to go and capture Gluttony's control tower, but if the one waiting there was not alone, then, rather than a tough struggle, it would be an inevitable defeat.
Hey! Is this the time to talk and get along with that bastard? This isn't the time for all that!
Otto had the nerves of his gut seemingly sharpened, accompanying a burning sensation on his forehead. What interrupted his thoughts at that moment was an extremely feminine voice. Of course, Otto also noticed the owner of that voice. Because he had noticed that, he was puzzled as well.
Why are you here? I'm sure that Reinhard told you to stay quietly in an evacuation center.
When the city is in this condition, as if I would ignore that and go sit in a small corner of the evacuation shelter.
The girl with blonde hair and red eyes said bravely, a person who stood out, with there being no possibility of mistaking her for someone else. That was who Felt was.
Right, and with all of that restlessness, what's the first thing you see after jumping out? Oh, just a Sin Archbishop! Yeah, okay, I think our defeat is inevitable with that kind of bad luck.
You don't need to be so pessimistic, Oni-san. For us, any encounter is a spice to gourmet. We're supposed to be Gluttony, but we completely understand the importance of preparation.
Batan Kaitos was at the centre, with Otto and Felt standing in a position that made a triangle. On the remaining vertice stood another figure, with whom Otto seemed to be familiar.
I'm happy to see you again, at least, Kiritaka.
Quiet voice with dead eyes and unable to take things obediently, Kun. I don't understand the feeling, though.
The figure of Kiritaka, who was covered in thin bandages and in pain, stood in front of Otto. Despite his presence, Otto was not rejoicing at seeing him. When Otto escaped the headquarters of the Moose Company, he had been left with Gluttony, making his fate uncertain. Otto was happy that he had survived that, but the actors in the current stage still made things uncertain. And that was... Otto, along with Felt and Kiritaka, got the same thought at the same time. Proper combatants were needed here.
So there's 3 groups, all of which are non-combatants, who have encountered a main force among the enemy. What a bad joke this is. Please, just stop.
I don't think that my allies be coming anytime soon. Right back at you, Nichan. You rely on just yourself too much.
Felt verbally slapped Otto. Otto as well could not make any excuses at this point. Behind Felt was a humongous-looking servant who wore a tough appearance. Kiritaka also had some members of the Scales of the White Dragon with him. It was only Otto who was alone.
We're saying that it will be the same no matter how many people you gather. If it's you guys, then the thirst of ours can never be healed. Ah, where are you? We're looking for you. We want to meet you. We want to meet you. Let us meet you.
Otto and the others were surrounded by pessimism regarding their fighting strength, but Baton Kaitos arbitrarily displayed his selfish attitude, uttering incomprehensible words with an ecstatic visage.
Want to meet? What are you saying?
Otto tried to continue the conversation by picking up his words. On the margin of Baton Kaitos' reasonability, if it came down to it, Otto could be knocked down in a moment, buying even the slightest of time. There was a need to create that gap, at all costs.
It would indeed be troublesome to explain it so many times. We can't afford to have our mouths broken by others either. That'd be the worst. Won't that be the worst? It would be the absolute worst. Wouldn't that be the worst? Isn't that the worst? Is what we're saying?
With steep expressions, Felt and Kiritaka shook their heads at Baton Kaitos' words. Rather than being answered, it seemed as if they were being questioned by multiple people. And, as that conversation got unexpectedly established, Otto continued to stare, as he was unable to talk to Gluttony. But, still, Otto, with his divine protection of soul language, could talk to even those beings which could not possibly have a human's will. Let us negotiate. No matter what the challenge might be, it would still be better than the problem Subaru was surrounded by.
Please, lend me your strength, Mr. Natsuki. I may actually become stronger.
Please, could you try to talk to me? The one you were talking about in your request. Could that be the artificial spirit?
Quite a dangerous step. That choice of words, that stubborn tone, could easily ignite Baton Kaitos' fuse. But Baton Kaitos won his head. When the young boy received Otto's words with the intention of responding to the conversation, he laughed, joyfully.
Who we want to know is only one. The one who did the broadcast from earlier. The hero who did it is the one we are searching for.
I take back those words. After all, Mr. Natsuki didn't lend me his power, and neither do I want to lend away his name.
That beloved hero seems to have come to cast his judgment upon us. This small chest is hurting in search of him.
The coming of such a troublesome person. Can he even manage to do anything at all? That person.
If he were really here, keep on dreaming, would be what he would say. But there was no point in citing curses instead of those not present here in the first place. At Otto's reaction, Felt frowned.
I told you that you only waste time by talking. Who's gonna sell away their family anyway? Even Merciless Me's got no doubts in that. But Reinhard, I'm not sure about him.
I'm sorry to hear such an evaluation, but I'm not gonna say anything because I saw how you were captured in such a descent.
Felt, rough as she was, did not say a word which answered Baton Kaitos' query. The same went for Kiritaka. Both of them immediately knew that Baton Kaitos' request was Subaru, and immediately discarded it. That judgment was good as a person, but was undoubtedly too hasty in this situation. With this rapid exchange, Subaru ended up not being sold away.
This girl and the others, after hearing the speech of the hero you're looking for, got excited and jumped out of the evacuation center. They're merely just impatient.
Huh?
Shh! Otto's story made Felt float on the blue line, and the one who quietened her was Kirataka. As expected of the president of the Moose Company, he had immediately understood Otto's judgment. At the same time, their gaze and line of sight matched. On his gaze, Otto drew in his chin.
If you don't want to answer my questions, then I'll guide you to that hero. But I demand that my life will be secure.
Really? You know it? The place where our hero is? The figure of our beloved hero? That weak and fragile, unable to help anything unless he is supported? That person?
Yeah.
Otto nodded, as he recognized the sense of incongruity in the spirit of Baton Kaitos' words. As if he knew a lot about Subaru, calling out for his hero, and also taking such deep notice of the person named Natsuki Subaru.
No, I'll guide you.
However, Otto dispelled that feeling. It regarded Subaru. It would not be surprising if 2 or 3 Sin Archbishops already knew about his face. It was not as if he was related to all of them, but greed, gluttony, lust, wrath. That was all of them, but that was all of them in the first place.
You have a face that is frowning badly, Oni-san.
There's no need for you to care so much. Rather than that, what are you going to do? Are you gonna kill every one of us at this place? Or are you gonna guarantee the lives of everyone here so you can encounter the hero? Which do you choose?
What a nasty way of talking. You're a dealer, aren't you? Such kinds of things in which you have to use your brains. Neither we nor us are good at it.
If that's the case, then choosing what's recommended and seeing it for yourself isn't so bad either. That's a saying among us merchants, though.
There was initiative in the conversation. Baton Kaitos was really obedient for a Sin Archbishop. It felt just like he was simply a child, and a distorted imbalance made him project himself as a monster. Maybe he was just a pitiable young boy, after all.
Just now, you pitied us, didn't you?
Just when such feelings gathered in the inner part of Otto's heart, Baton Kaitos spoke with a brisk voice, in a low tone.
Huh?
Those eyes, we remember them. Those are eyes which look down upon. Those are eyes which are scornful. With those eyes, thinking that we are some product. Is that so? We were getting a nasty feeling since earlier.
Otto continued to watch, as Baton Kaitos' eyes became filled with complete disgust and hostility.
You're a merchant, right? Putting price tags on things? There are people who sell them to line their own pockets. Human values and opinions, too. Everything. They're dead people who put them on a scale and calculate, aren't they?
That is somewhat... I think there's a little difference in opinions going on here.
As clouds of doubt began to form, Otto, whose mind was already walking on a tightrope, also was blindfolded. Did I manage to get my message across? That was a question, the answer to which was clearly visible in the expressions of Felt and Kirataka, who had done nothing but witness the discussion.
Who the hell will listen to what you guys are saying? After all, this world is gluttonous drinking. Gluttony, until we have eaten it, licked it, slurped it, swallowed it, we won't trust it.
Baton Kaitos shouted, while stepping ahead, displaying his fangs. The crisis could not be stopped. No trick, nor word, could reach the proverbial barrel about to explode.
So it did end up like this in the end, didn't it?
Saying this with dissatisfaction, Felt held her knife in her hand. Strangely enough, what Baton Kaitos had were also short knives, attached on both his hands. Nonetheless, there would be a huge difference in the skill level.
If it has come to this, the ones to rely on are every one of the scales of the White Dragon.
Hey, for once I'm saying we're also here.
The fellow who was next to Felt raised his voice, but Felt swung her head, which meant it would be quite a lively show. Someone like Subaru would only prove to be useless in this scene.
Just by thinking that, the value of that person gets significantly reduced, huh?
Is your talking done?
Baton Kaitos slowly looked at the faces of Otto and the rest. An expression of fighting was on everyone's face. Looking at that, Baton Kaitos nodded with satisfaction.
In gourmet, preparations and ingredients are important, starting from assembling the good ingredients available. Only then will the virtue of the dish be edible.
I sort of get it, I sort of don't get it.
It's fine even if you don't understand. Neither have we ever thought that our aesthetic could be understood by anyone except us. Now, well then, about time. Let's eat.
The conversation cemented the fate. Baton Kaitos, opening his large mouth, approached Otto with a tremendously powerful jump. Otto, who was standing next to water, pointed his finger towards the blasphemer.
I'm glad I had this assurance!
Huh?
Hope you have fun!
Otto made a high sound twice with his shoes in front of the doubtful Baton Kaitos. Hearing that sound, something was drawn closer.
Huh?
Behind Otto, a flock of water dragons jumped out of the waterway and charged towards Baton Kaitos in a single stroke. Otto had managed to brainwash the herd of water dragons, accompanied by the immense influence of the Authority of Wrath. The Authority of Wrath, with its ultra-wide range, even if it did not cover the entire city, greatly shook the emotions of people, planting the seeds of faint spirit among the citizens, resulting in enormous disarray and suspicion. Nevertheless, the recent speech by Natsuki Subaru had raised the people's morale, which was also the basis of Otto's hypothesis of using the water dragon's strength.
Oh.
Baton Kaitos, mid-air, could not stop the large number of water dragons. With their limbless and serpentine body structures, and weight that was not below 100 kilos, the multiple bodies crushed Baton Kaitos as they continued glaring with their blue and white scales, their fangs continuously aimed for the crushed Baton Kaitos.
Hunting water dragons is cruel.
With their fangs on their prey, they spun and tore the flesh apart. That small body would turn into countless pieces of meat, even without such an enormous number of water dragons. The aftermath would not be good. Due to the influence of the Authority of Wrath, the water dragons were in a strong state of excitement and were skillfully deceived by words with the divine protection of soul language. He had lured them into cooperating, under the innocent pretense of taking down the one behind the unrest in the city. It was a promise he would have been forced to go back on, if he had not run into a Sin Archbishop. And the result was this.
Amazing! This was done by Nichan!
Felt rang up, as she rose to cheer. Despite not moving a single eyebrow, seeing this cruel scene, only now did it seem that she had been moved.
What I did was to give just a pinch to the water dragons. Whether Sin Archbishop or not, he can't win against nature.
Possibly so, but you are a person who can do much more horrible things than what I thought.
Anyway, I'm glad we're okay. Kiritaka too, to think that you survived.
I did indeed get injured on my back, but the Scales of the White Dragon, which is a famous mercenary group, helped me out with their expertise in medical treatment.
However, it unquestionably looked painful. Still, what could be the reason for which Kiritaka was still on the move, even with such an injury? Understanding the meaning behind Otto's gaze, Kiritaka put his hands on his chest, with a look that reeked of seriousness.
It is decided, isn't it? I hold an executive position in the management of Pristella. I heard the broadcast, but I cannot leave everything to it.
I believe that spirit to be commendable. But
Of course, there is a low possibility of me being able to fight properly and be of any help. But, for once, even I should be able to do something.
Kirataka shamefully made that remark after the effect of the authority of wrath and Subaru's speech. Indeed, it had been Subaru's speech which provided the support to the citizens, and it was a medicine too strong for people who already had strong missions to complete, to the extent that it disabled the fear and reason that would normally stop a person from doing such reckless acts.
That's just recklessness. Don't go about thinking such things.
Reading Otto's thoughts, Felt said this with sharpened lips.
Everyone's got the right to fight for the things important to them. Nobody can stop the feeling of someone who wants to do something for those things, even if it's not backed by a great reason. Can they?
that's an individual opinion, and such a judgment shouldn't be taken by someone who's in a responsible position.
It depends on the things. Also, I never said that this applied for this situation, did I? Both me and those guys only came out because we could win.
Win, you say?
Following Kirataka, Felt rubbed under her nose with her finger.
I also heard Nichan's speech. That stupid Reinhard, too, along with you, went to the city hall. Everyone except me. Isn't that right?
Unfairly enough, what Felt was feeling right now was a misunderstanding. In this world, just as there were right words to fit, there were also some things that could only be done by those humans who were apt enough. Just as that theory, Otto stopped pursuing further, since he seemed to not know the reason why he was here.
Is Heinkel properly captured?
He's being kept at Camberley's shelter. Me and Gaston are gonna take back what was taken.
What was taken? Saying that, Felt turned her jaw towards Gaston. Gaston held a white packet in his hands, and it looked like a long spear.
And that's...
Ranji, it seems to be a secret weapon that he kept in our staff's bag. It's a magical tool, I mean.
Magic tool? How convenient for such a timing!
Ideally, the intimidating power of the magic tool would make it possible to have results that would normally not be possible. After hearing that it was a magic tool, one's expectations were bound to increase.
The conditions for using it are a pain, but it's worth it for its power. Even so, this thing can come in handy for cleaning up the mess Nichan is in.
Felt's words might not have had, but what entered Otto's ears at that moment was a scream. Otto looked back to where it had come from, and Felt and Kirataka reacted by widening their eyes. They did not hear that scream anymore. It was obvious, as it was the scream of a voice incomprehensible to humans.
They seem to be a much more fun opponent than we thought. But mere water lizards are no food, are they? Whether it's for us gourmet or for any other gastronomer, they're uneatable.
A voice was heard, a voice that seemed to be able to beat up and defeat anything in this world. At the same time, the flock of water dragons should have been jumping around and preying upon that prey. Their figures with their tails, torsos, heads now disheveled, were extremely excited at the time of the initial attack. But their painful suffering and their flowing blood conveyed the abnormality of the situation to everyone.
Miss Felt, this magic tool, it's powerful, right?
From what Old Man Rom said, even Reinhard can't avoid it, you know?
I see. That's pretty assuring. Kiritaka!
What is it?
Felt, who received that answer, and Kirataka, who had an expression of despair after seeing the water dragons. Him leaving behind the scales of the white dragon was still, for the non-combatant Kirataka, very dangerous.
Me? Felt and every one of the scales of the White Dragon are gonna go by time. So I want you to go to the City Hall. No, first go to the 8th Evacuation Center on 1st Street.
Go there? Is there something over there?
If you go there, you'll understand everything. The one who can win, which you'll subsequently send here, is present there.
Seeing Otto's determined face as he made that declaration, Kiritaka, changing his expression, nodded powerfully. He then turned back towards his guards.
It is just as you heard. I will, from now, just as Otto instructed, head for the evacuation shelter. I want you to stay here and fight along with them, to protect this city.
Our work is to be a young man's guard? That's what it's supposed to be? When did it become such a bothersome position?
That is wrong. Your job is not to be my guard. Help me with my purpose was the first contract.
In front of the bitterly smiling faces of those belonging to the Scales of the White Dragon, Kiritaka answered with a face that showed utmost seriousness. The reason why his way of addressing, his way of self-reference became further polite, was because the city meant much more to Kiritaka than just having a responsible position in it.
Help me with my purpose, Scales of the White Dragon, to protect our important workplace, the city of Pristella, and let us fight to save our beloved songstress Liliana!
Even though turning back would be impossible.
It has nothing to do with not being able to smile again, or what lies in my thoughts. I love Liliana, and I need no more reason to put my life in danger.
Saying that, Kiritaka looked at Otto and felt. At the same time, he lifted the bag he was holding in his hands.
Without fail, let us show you that we can do it, because no one knows layout of this city and Liliana better than me.
For a moment, I thought it was cool, but it's all disappointing in the end.
Otto agreed with Felt's impression, but he did not mention it. He nodded silently, seeing Kiritaka's preparations.
About time. Are you prepared?
The movements of the agitated water dragons had stopped, their white eyes rolling to the backs of their heads. They were close to dying. Through the gap in that group, Batankaitos slowly appeared. The blasphemer, shaped like a young boy, embraced his shoulders and happily asserted himself as an adversary, and glared.
Wasn't that nice? That counterattack? Recklessness and braveness are different, and abundant and persistence too are absolutely unlike. That's a face that knows about that. We're glad. Finally, you guys too got the qualification to be taken to our dinner table.
Till now, everything we did was just worth going into the trash can, huh? This guy's got everything messed up.
Whether being recognized as the enemy is good or bad is again different. Personally, I think that those who get disdained can still do a lot.
Did he get this idea by being around Subaru? Or could it be that his thoughts had been influenced by Subaru? Huh, how bad that would be. Anyway,
Kiritaka!
I wish for your good fortune in the upcoming battle.
following Otto's call, Kiritaka ran to leave this place. Just one person, Batankaitos, tilted his head after seeing the figure of Kiritaka, who was trying to escape from the battlefield.
Just stop! After how you've gently stimulated our motivation and this feeling of hunger.
Following the back of the escaping Kiritaka, Batankaitos' body jumped forward. Fully using his small body, his aerial speed in a single direction was unbelievably fast. With the same pace, Batankaitos' fangs passed straight through and reached Kiritaka. They were on the verge to do so.
Gaston!
If I die here, I'll cry and come to haunt you after becoming a hollow.
Feld's voice ripped through the air, and the giant, who jumped at almost the same time, interrupted Batankaitos' course. Crossing his arms in front of his face and curling his back, it was Feld's servant, Gaston.
Don't get in the way!
Swinging the daggers of his arms, Batankaitos tried to cut down the hindrance. The steel blade shone brightly, and its blow struck Gaston's exposed arm. Sounds echoed, and Batankaitos' dagger broke.
Huh?
What just happened?
Baton Kaitos' questioning voice was accompanied by Otto's own internal question, alongside the others. They had seen what had happened. Gaston's position had not changed at all. With his arm, he had broken Baton Kaitos' dagger.
My giant is pretty tough. Enough to be my guard.
The happy felt, who seemed to think that they had scared him off, threw the knife she held in her hands towards Baton Kaitos. Baton Kaitos avoided it with the same momentum as he avoided Gaston's kick. Just as he somersaulted backwards towards the open distance, the scales of the white dragon changed their positions and blocked the road. Kiritaki's retreat had become a reality.
Hey, we see.
The overwhelming existence called Baton Kaitos was outnumbered, but the pleasant smile that was sticking to his face did not cease. With the same pace, Baton Kaitos glanced at the opposing Otto.
The number of people Lewis is likely to be pleased with is 3.
Whispering, with a trembling sigh, he removed the broken dagger from his arm. Now his left arm was bare-handed, and only his right hand was armed.
For some reason, I feel like the gap hasn't closed at all.
As usual, Otto's warning bell continued to respond to this. The greatest of threats. Ignoring that voice in his head, Otto looked at Felt's profile. That unchanging face determinedly looked at the intense battle.
Let's fight, without the option of running away. Considering the amount of opportunities I've had for fighting in the last year, what will I even do as a merchant?
The voice that spilled from that mouth did not reach anyone. Henceforth, no one noticed that the voice had a pessimistic tone, and not because of the content of its words.
Alright, just a quick reminder now that we probably have way more people here. We are looking for some understudies for Studio Reverie. If you are interested in working as any of the characters that you've seen on screen, I love so much for ReZero, please feel free to submit your version of an impression or yourself doing these characters, and we might be able to keep you in a understudy pool. And there's also extras, Ricardo, and Julius up for grabs as well. Thank you, everyone, and 56 should be up soon. Bye!
Chapter 55: The God of War's Challenger. The legends of the God of War, Kurgan, were widely circulated in the Wallachia Empire. In the powerful and metocratic Wallachian Empire, as long as one had the ability, the circumstances of their birth would be disregarded. In comparison to Lugunica, which remained discriminatory against demi-humans, and the Holy Kingdom of Gutzeko, which barred foreigners, Wallachia adopted a system similar to the Kararagi city-states, one devoid of consideration for blood or appearance. Therefore, among the 4 major countries, Wallachia was considered to be the best country of residence for non-purebred humans. But on the other hand, the kind of cruel order, ruled by survival of the fittest, meant that there would be severe repression and oppression on those lacking power and wisdom. Of course, personal evaluations and racial evaluations would be different. In particular, the multi-armed tribe had been wandering around for many years, as a nomadic race which never stayed in a single place. The appearance of the multi-armed tribe was just as its name, and their adaptability at using magic as demi-humans was exceptionally low. In terms of a race, it could only be thought of as inferior. The total number of individuals of the multi-armed tribe was not large. If ever a dispute arose, they would be more inclined to relocate than to fight for the protection of their land. It was inevitable that such a race, driven away from countless places, would come to the Empire of Wallachia, where it would have only been natural for them to have been swallowed up by the iron-blooded Empire and faced with decline. In this meritocratic world, a man named Kurgan shouted his refusal. Although the characteristics of the multi-armed tribe were that they had more than the 2 arms humans did, that number varied from person to person. Kurgan, who had 8 arms, where most had 4 or 5, was a peculiar existence. It had been the then youthful Kurgan who had, when the local lord moved to evict them from his land, refused, waved his 8 arms to drive the messenger back. Then, spurring his trembling brethren on, the lord's private army was driven back and broken through, time and time again, until finally, the lord's mansion itself was attacked. Although the barbaric attack had frightened the lord, Kurgan did not offer a violent solution. He spoke that he and his people had proven themselves, and accepted a prize seat on the lord's private army. After that, throughout various battles, the name of Kurgan of the 8 Arms was passed down as a legend of the Wallachian Empire. His whole body had been submerged in cold water, and he could still see the wavering moon through the water that flowed overhead. The bone that supported his right eye had been broken, and the eyeball enclosed inside the socket seemed on the verge of slipping off. Instantly, he used his left hand to support the magic treatment and perform minimal healing. His remaining left eye jumped around, surveying the red sediment flowing along with the water, his body arcing back upward where it hit the bottom of the waterway. Obviously, he lay submerged in the water, but he could feel no trace of its frigid coolness. Emancipated from the heavy weight of gravity, strength slowly poured back into his hands and feet in a world where their burden had been lost. If only unloading the yoke of the heart could be as simple as removing the yoke of the body. His heart now was submerged in darkness. Or he could just keep sinking in this way. In no way was such a thought completely absent from his heart. However, drawing breath began to grow painful, and in the darkness, his eyes had not left him completely blinded. The peach-haired girl, the orange-furred cat girl, and the black-haired boy emerged and ignited his waterlogged heart. Maybe it was a flame that would disappear immediately. Earlier, that had been precisely the case. Even if the bravado of pretending to be brave had been entirely shattered, which proved so. Even so, no matter what, that was no excuse to be immersed in here forever. Stretching to straighten his back, slamming hard into the water, pushing himself up in one breath. As his head emerged from the water, Garfield shook his head. The vision in his right eye was still obstructed, and the lingering after effects of the beating had turned into a tetanus ringing ceaselessly in his head. His entire bloodied, wounded body was floored with nausea, and the lack of sensation in his mouth held a discordant effect on his teeth.
Fucking shit.
Grabbing the edge of the waterway to yank himself up, like a wild beast, shaking his entire body to clear the water, Garfield glanced around. Earlier, Garfield had been slammed into the waterway from that spot. Nothing had changed. The war god had remained standing in place. The position of his outstretched demon cleavers was the same, with delay in his slight aura of battle, maintaining his stance, acting if there was not the slightest doubt that Garfield would come back up. Looking at the silent god of war, Garfield began to think. After all, the necessity of the clash between Garfield and Kurgan was small indeed. The task that Garfield hoped to accomplish was to stop the surprise attack that Lust was likely to launch on the city hall. Even if he fought with Kurgan here, he would not be saving the city hall, where solely non-combatants remained. At a glance, everything told Garfield to avoid a fight with Kurgan here.
But no way he'd let me escape.
A body so large that heads would crane to see it fully, and an overwhelming amount of muscle. Even if he looked incapable of agility, even if he tried to flee, he could not imagine that he could escape the reach of those swords. From the very instant that this god of war had appeared before him, Garfield had been rendered incapable of escape. Now, there were only two choices that Garfield was allowed to make. Fight to the death, or die without resisting. These two choices only.
Fuck! Right now is not the time to think like that!
Defeatist thoughts flashing through his head, Garfield gnashed his teeth to drive them away. The fangs that had been urgently regrown to make up for his losses tinged with pain. But that pain drove negative thoughts of loss to deep recesses. Any notion of the feeling of impending loss, of the hairbringer of defeat, would be flattened. Self-satisfying words to justify his loss were unnecessary. Win, 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 win! Seize victory, prove his own worth. Roaring loudly, driving away any weakness, Garfield once again rushed forward. In the previous skirmish, a single blow that he had put his all into had been blocked. However, if his weight were not enough, he could use his speed to control him. Using claws, using teeth, opening, tearing, biting, plundering. The silent god of war greeted the rushing Garfield. A blow from a demon cleaver came from his shoulder. Call it a sniping blow, but the penetrative force was too low. Call it a crushing blow, but it moved too sharply. It belonged solely to Kurgan, this combination of swordplay and strength that would leave his opponents crushed. The suddenly approaching blade of the demon cleaver passed over the back of Garfield's head as he leaned forward. After that narrow miss, Garfield's thinking grew steadily more fervent. If there were only one blow, Garfield should be able to escape with ease. The speed of his small form, elite as it was quite different from the speed of that enormous body with its equally enormous arms and weapons. After avoiding his massive attack, sending a slashing paw towards his chest as a parting gift was easy. Or rather, should have been. However, Garfield, who had buried himself deep in those arms, was forced to dodge on the spot. One of Kurgan's giant sidearms swept upward, threatening to send him flying with a blow to his chin. This was also unexpected. No, his body's sense of balance was simply different. Kurgan, born of the multi-armed tribe, had trained relentlessly to find a style which suited his own body, wielding his 8 arms, honing frightening techniques of his flesh, which was entirely different from what maneuvers Garfield knew about exercising 4 limbs. Once his attack ended, his body would be left open, and weaknesses would be revealed. Such common sense applied here. If one arm were to be defended against, then it was common sense that a weakness would be born by wrapping around to the side of that arm. But here, even if he could block one arm's fatal strike, he would still have the other 7 to contend with. If he could not manage all that, only a single dead end awaited. In front of the shuddering Garfield, the arm of the god of war seemed to be enough to shake the world. The roaring demon cleavers struck from all directions, crushing their opponent's body with violent force. Blocking one blow with his shield, bending over to dodge another, darting backward to reduce the impact of the next, spinning to avoid yet another, offsetting one with all the force from his body, allowing the next to shatter his shoulder to avoid a fatal injury, deflecting one more with a beastified arm of his. Then a single hit came true, to make him fall on the stone steps. 8 arms. Just now, Garfield had thrown his all against Kurgan, and had only barely survived the counter-offense which followed. Such an attack held the deadliness of a tempest, and yet, to Kurgan, He was merely swinging each of his 8 arms. If this were what it meant to be a god of war, if the fight continued, Garfield would be annihilated in moments. Right now, collapsed on the ground, the bloody Garfield still drew breath only because the still standing god of war had no intent to pursue. Assuming the same stance he had taken when Garfield had clambered out of the waterway, he looked down the loser in their struggle. To be underestimated, no such feelings of frustration surged forth. The question now was of even occupying the same dimension, competing with each other, warriors on a battlefield. The name of this god of war, Kurgan the 8 Arms, was a legend. He could not win. To win was impossible. A legend that had passed away. A man who had become a hero. This war god. Thriving in the imposing Wallachian Empire, even when his clan had been inferior and despised, was this man who had changed the destiny of his race on his own. Garfield was nothing more than a little kid who revered that legend. Clearly that was so. But why did his body right itself? Even his inner self was so shaken, and yet his body stood upright.
Ugh! Noisy, so fucking noisy!
The rush of his heartbeat. It was now unusually loud. The ringing of drums accompanied his ears. Garfield stomped on the ground. The stone steps beneath his feet began to split, and the cracks stretched straight below Kurgan's feet. The silent Kurgan and the bloodied Garfield stood in confrontation. Swaying, Garfield gathered power in his toes, once again slamming on the ground. Then, Kurgan moved. No, he had been moved. True Garfield's souls, the divine protection of Earth spirits worked its power. That power moved from the newly formed cracks to Kurgan's feet, and the ground supporting the giant flew towards the heavens. That enormous body floating in midair, honed though it was by 100 battles, was still a slave to the laws of physics. Losing the support of his lower body, he could no longer execute his powerful strikes.
Ah!
This moment was the key. Taking aim at where Kurgan hovered in midair, Garfield swung his arm. Part beast, an arm covered in the fur and muscle of a giant tiger struck Kurgan. Even the god of war had no means of resisting if he could not adjust his stance in midair. With the sound of weapons colliding, the intercepting demon cleaver flew away, pulling Kurgan in its wake. And then Garfield's kick was waiting for him. Taking advantage of the first chink in his armor, his claws pierced those thick, abominable muscles. Roaring, Garfield ceaselessly pushed his opponent, who had bent over, pressing on with his attacks. Chest, thighs, knees, and stomach all took constant blows. Suppressed by the force of the impact, Kurgan's numerous arms were unable to catch up to defend, and he could only take each attack in his blade position.
Gotcha!
Garfield, convinced that victory was in sight, cried out. The slashing, bestial claws tore into Kurgan's chest, spraying Garfield with dark blood. Garfield swiped the blood from his body, continuing to press forward, confident that his opponent had been rendered helpless. Garfield's eyes found Kurgan, skin carved from iron. And then cold washed over him as his hairs stood up. The god of war's eyes fixed themselves on Garfield, his demeanor exactly what it had been at the start, unchanged, not shaken in the slightest. It was then that Garfield realized the god of war's delayed counterattack. 2 demon cleavers were swung, slammed into Garfield's pair of Hurley-raised shields, breaking both his arms, sending his figure crashing hard into the ground. Even a grunt could not be formed. In an instant, orientation vanished from his field of vision, and Garfield's limbs were entirely controlled by the impact that had sent him packing. All he knew was what had happened. In midair, without any grounding point, Kurgan gave a fierce attack with only his upper body. Simple and straightforward was this method. Grabbing the blade of the demon cleaver with both hands to increase his weight of the swing, the force had skyrocketed. That was the principle of a flick to the forehead. Using 2 hands as a base to turn the attack into a fatal blow, sending him flying to reduce the force of his attacks. This method of combat had been thoroughly resolved by his opponent. Having his chain of counterattacks interrupted, Garfield was struck by a foot from the huge body directly above him, coupling the foot with his falling momentum, and Garfield's body squeaked and rebounded upward from the ground as soon as it made contact. His thoughts occupied by pain and loss. What drove him to use healing magic was solely his survival instinct. Attaching the broken bones on his upper arm, elbow, and shattered shoulders to fixing his eviscerated internal organs. His ribs, waist bones, and parts of his left thigh had also broken, but those would prove too difficult to recover in an emergency. His gait heating within his body, he drew upon all his magic, exhausting his mana supply. Taking advantage of being able to draw strength from the ground with his body pressed against it, he began to treat and repair himself from head to toe. A few seconds, or tens of seconds, or possibly a few minutes. Blocking out even the passage of time, Garfield focused on the restoration of his flesh. Finally, reaching a point where he could just barely manage to move, he spat the blood from his throat and got up. Calmly, the god of war regarded the blood-stained Garfield. Seeing this gesture, the corners of Garfield's eyes burned. The heat within had him bowing his head, teeth shaking.
The fuck's this?
Since the beginning, Kurgan's stance had remained consistent. He would meet Garfield's challenges, but he would not take the initiative to attack, nor would he rush at Garfield with swords drawn. Garfield had been mercilessly defeated 3 times. The feeling of defeat and humiliation in his heart had smashed through him, his warrior's conceit and arrogance. He felt that he had to win against him. In a similar way, he also thought that it would be far cleaner to kill himself than to suffer this ridicule. The god of war, Kurgan, the hero of Wallachia, being regarded as the peak of all the soldiers, asking him to understand the frustration in Garfield's heart would be impossible.
Might as well just kill me.
He could ask that of him. Honestly admitting defeat, acknowledging the obvious disparity in power, asking to be allowed to die as a warrior, putting down his shields, spreading his arms, and forming an expression of bliss. To plead with him like this, would he be willing to fall on battle against the god of war, to a warrior? This was perhaps the proudest way to die.
In this place.
Wouldn't it be so easy if it were all to end?
It'd be too easy for it to be over, huh?
Equipped with his shields, tightening his arms to show hostility, looking forward as if intending to struggle.
That kind of thinking keeps lingering.
Someone had said to him once, to not think so much when fighting.
You're pretty strong when you're not thinking about extraneous things, and just using your instincts to fight.
Was that really the case?
That sound won't go away!
How annoying was his heartbeat? Every bone in him twisted and connected, and a sound began to form. Annoying, 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 annoying. That extraneous sound, all of it, completely in its entirety, was so annoying. The sound. Could he not hear it?
Can I hear? Always. Of fucking course my amazing self can hear it.
Even if he avoided thinking about it, it would amount to nothing. In Garfield's ear, or perhaps in some part of him separate from his tympanic membrane, that voice was still being accepted. Someone's voice. An intimate voice. A familiar voice. A heart-warming voice. A choked voice. A proud voice. A voice which could not suppress its rage. All these voices refused to let Garfield go. Even if he relied on instinct to fight, these incoming waves of sound would not recede at all. And Garfield would not be alone. The more he thought about it, the weaker he was. And him right now was so weak. It was different from when he had been in Sanctuary, playing at being the lone wolf. Now, he bore more humility, had seen more things. The more people there was to someone, the weaker they would become. And they would spend their entire lives growing weaker.
How's that possible?
Embracing those unfading voices, swallowing his sense of defeat, stirring up a desire for victory, and inserting his admiration and envy into all that. Garfield issued a challenge to the god of war.
Come at me!
Garfield's gaze had changed. Kurgan, witnessing this, quietly moved. Of his 4 demon cleavers, he sheated 2. However, this meant in no way that Kurgan's strength had weakened. Instead, it allowed him more focus on just those 2 demon cleavers. Almost as if to explain, the god of war adjusted his stance. The god of war, who had stood facing forward, balanced on his right foot, leaned in slightly as he faced Garfield. This was a battle stance. Evidence that Kurgan finally regarded Garfield as an enemy.
So just now, you really were treating my amazing self as a kid. The osprey's unsuited to child rearing. Does this happen to be the case here?
In silence, Garfield flew at the god of war. Responding to this brutal offensive was a demon cleaver, suppressing the horrifying feeling of a wall of despair closing in on him. Garfield rushed forward, seizing his opportunity with his all. This was a misjudged tactic from his earlier attack. It had been caused by the aura that Kurgan gave off, as well as Garfield's own imagined fearful admiration of the hero.
Ah!
With a hook, he lashed out at Kurgan. Although there was a heavy sound of iron on flesh, he had not hit where he had aimed, but an arm that had been extended to block.
What kind of joke is this?
Seeing his fist blocked by that palm, Garfield roared. Drawing strength from the soles of his feet, he poured that power into his fist which met Kurgan's palm, allowing it to explode forward. Kurgan twisted his fingers, turning himself around to avoid the sudden punching force, and Garfield took the opportunity to land on the god of war's waist, and up his chest he ran, as if he were doing a flip. Kurgan leaned back, lashing out with his demon cleaver at the same time. Reading the flow of the wind and atmosphere to predict the direction, Garfield accepted the attack with his pair of shields. With a thundering sound, Garfield's body flew backward. Slamming his limbs into the slate floor, he forced his body to stay in place. Looking up, the war god's pursuit had already approached. Kurgan, who had yet to launch his own attack, now rushed forward to crush Garfield. Only 1 instant to predict, only 1 moment to react, only 1 second for the result to bear fruit. Garfield strained the arms he had embedded into the slate, lifting the ground before him. The rushing Kurgan shattered the wall launched at his shoulder, and lunged with a demon cleaver. A canopy. Garfield, taking a direct hit, was propelled backward. The heel that had tried to stand firm slid across the ground, and shards of teeth flew forward. But
Don't look down on me, bastard!
he used his teeth to block the tip of the piercing strike of the demon cleaver. From his incisors, blood dripped to cover the demon cleaver, but Garfield did not hesitate. He strained the strength in his neck and jaw, and Kurgan's body shook. The latter grabbed hold of the bitten demon cleaver's handle with another arm, and strained to extract it in one motion. But the tooth piercing it would not give. Not only that, but the force of his biting teeth yet increased. Garfield's upper body swelled and began to perform a half-beastification. Transforming his head to animal form would lower his capacity for rational thought significantly. His reasoning would regress to the level of a beast's, and he had been told countless times that this was a double-edged sword. But in this moment, that was Garfield's choice. The power of his abominable half was indispensable. Faced with the most powerful of the multi-armed tribe, the god of war, how could he win if he denied his own fundamental nature?
Oh tiger, oh tiger, oh tiger! In this moment, lend me your strength.
The instant the golden tiger opened its eyes, the demon cleaver was torn. The blade was shredded, and the force of the destruction moved from blade to hilt, shaking the giant's form as he suddenly lost his hold and balance. This was truly an opportunity. The beast swung its paws, beating at Kurgan's head. The giant could not catch his footing under the beast's repeated strikes. A slice and a bat arrived at the same time from the bestial arm, and Kurgan, dripping blood, was forced back. He made to pursue further, but his nose was met with a fist. The enormous tiger's face was smashed with an elbow, and the bridge of its nose collapsed. And immediately following, from below, was a strike to his mandible. His body fell, the body collapsed, and a punch from the front slammed into his face. Blood splashed into his dimming field of vision. Orientation, control, vanished from his mind. Not that it had anything to do with him. What was important was all contained in his heart. Even without thinking about it, it would not vanish, and it would drive his bloody, battered body on. The demon cleaver approached, the remaining one of the pair, which had not been shattered. Only 1 instant to predict, only 1 moment to react, only 1 second for the result to bear fruit. The blade cutting towards his body scraped against his shield and met his stomach. Even had the impact been dispelled, this blow still had the power to slice through the thick, abdominal muscles of his body. However, faced with hair stiff as golden needles and the swelling body of the enormous tiger, bisection was still out of reach. At Kurgan's feet, a stomp from Garfield. This was an effect of the blessing of divine protection of earth spirits. The blade still lodged in his abdominal muscles. The god of war's body still held it. In a grappling contest, Kurgan would come out ahead. But Garfield could not sit still. The lack of teeth, the arm that had been broken several times over, and the instinct overpowering his sensibility had him catch Kurgan firmly. Yanking on his cumbersomely large body, Garfield threw Kurgan into the waterway behind. The instant he was thrown forward, Kurgan's arm reached out to grab Garfield, dragging the two of them down together. Accompanied by a loud splash, the two plummeted into the waterway. Two huge bodies were scuffed by the current and each other, the blood straining the water being swept away. In the water, the two figures were still continuously attacking and defending. In the dark, vision-obscuring liquid, Garfield and Kurgan continued to beat each other without regard to the resistance of the water. Fists of a giant mangled his organs, excruciatingly expelling the oxygen from his lungs. Pain unto pain, suffering unto suffering. So the underwater battle continued. Between that, Garfield understood his own disadvantage. For whatever reason, the god of war before him did not seem to breathe. He felt as if his opponent were a resurrected body. Oxygen starvation brought lethargy, and Garfield found his every action slow and stagnant. The flow of the water gradually surged and swelled, and again, the two figures fell from waterfall to waterfall. As his consciousness faded, his fingertips were sapped of their fighting spirit. His breaths were not enough. This would become the true cause of his defeat, as Garfield's consciousness was leaving him, and victory was a heavy sound that the muted, stagnant water carried to him. Returning to his distant consciousness, Garfield saw it within the murky water. The demon cleaver sheared into the wall of the canal, and the god of war's strike created a divisive gap in the path of the water's flow. He had neither the chance nor the air to ask what he was doing. The sound of blades from every which way shook the flow of water, until finally, the sound of breaking metal and a shocking rush echoed in tandem. In the next moment, a tremendous new stream was formed. Separate from the waterway's true flow, it was another stream of water entirely. Garfield's body, captured within this stream, was sucked and thrown clear from the waterway. The feeling of water around him disappeared, and Garfield spat the volumes of water he had swallowed. From his eyes, nose, ears, all the holes in his head, water poured forth, and Garfield shook his head. Just as he was wondering what had happened, he heard it.
Gorgeous tiger?
Had missed the sound of flowing water. Someone called out quietly to him.